How to paint a cute bunny. This is a watercolor tutorial on how to paint this very cute little bunny. First off, let's start off with a pencil sketch that I'll transfer to watercolor paper. Okay, now I'm doing a wet into wet technique. I am just putting water onto the drawing, and I did a first layer of brown. Now I'm doing a second layer of brown right on top. So this is a wet layer on top of a wet layer. And I'm watching the watercolors react to each other and just letting the watercolor do its thing. Watercolor is very spontaneous, and that's the fun part about watercolor. So you just have to kind of be patient and just see what happens. So I'm slowly just working the second layer of watercolor into the edges just so that I can define a form, the form of the bunny. And as you see, when it's too much watercolor, I use a brush and I lift it up. So notice when I add a second layer of watercolor onto the first wet layer, it just becomes darker because I'm adding more color. And when you layer color on top of each other, it just gets darker. So whether you're layering the same color brown on top of each other or brown and then a little bit of blue, that's how you can achieve darks. I'm not going to tell you specifically which brown colors to use because this is more about how to paint and not necessarily, oh, you need to use this exact color that I'm using. These techniques work for whether you're using browns or greens or pinks. More importantly, I just want you to see how layers get built upon one another. Another way to think about it is that when you're working this wet into wet technique, you're basically adding like puddles of water to each other, and you can either use your brush to gently move these puddles to create the stains that you want, or if there's too much water, just again use your brush to just lift it up like a little sponge. So another thing to think about is that it's really easy to just get overwhelmed and add too much water and color, and then everything just becomes a giant puddle mess, especially if your paper is not thick enough to like handle all of that. So if you want, you can wait a little bit for each layer to dry and then go back over it with some more watercolor. So in that sense, you get more control of things because things are not all moving around at the same time. And so this is just something where you have to practice and play with it. There's no real wrong answer. If you see what I'm doing, I'm just very delicately adding a little bit more watercolor at a little bit at a time, just so that I don't make a giant puddle mess. And again, every time I add some more watercolor, I'm sharpening up my edges. Now I'm working on the diaper. So this is a blue diaper, and again, I'm just adding like very soft layers of watercolor, and then I'm gradually adding more watercolor to define the shapes more. Okay, so overall I think the diaper is too light, so I am adding another layer of watercolor, and I'm working on the band on the diaper. So I'm trying to define that a little bit more with a more intense blue. Although I'm going to take my own advice and just wait for things to dry. Okay, so while we're waiting for things to dry, I'm doing the eyes and the mouth. When I painted the eyes and the mouth, I used a combination of brown and blue. I don't usually use black, just because I feel that brown and blue makes a more vibrant black than just straight black. So now I'm doing the ears, and I'm making sure that this is a very rosy, lively red. That's not like blood red. You know, it's like a nice pink with a tint of yellow. Okay, so now I am defining the ground. Okay, so I'm adding some shadows onto the ground because the bunny is standing on this ground. Now I'm doing the pink of the eraser of the pencil. Again, I'm just doing a first quick layer, defining the space, and just doing a wet into wet technique of a deeper pink. While that's drying, I'm going to do the eyebrows. Again, that's a blue and brown combination. I took that same dark color and I mixed it with white, and that's how you're seeing the gray that I'm using right now. The pencil itself is going to be yellow, like a traditional number 2 pencil. Ooh, now I'm adding some a deeper concentration of the yellow to give it a little bit more vibrancy. Adding little bits of shadow where the hand is holding the pencil. Again, this is a layer in which I'm gonna wait for it to dry. Okay, so I'm drawing the flowers and the bird that the bunny is drawing with his pencil. Okay, now I am doing outlines of the bunny himself. I am using a brown to create this outline for him. I don't want to use a dark brown because then I feel like it's going to weigh down the bunny. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to just gradually work in a darker and darker color just to see how far I can push it. The side of the bunny that's in shadow has a darker outline. So overall the outline is kind of like a gradient. So there's parts where like the outline's darker and then parts where the outline is lighter. Just adding some shadows here onto the eraser. Because things have dried now, it's easy for me to go on top and paint on top of that. Oh, I forgot to mention that I added white highlights to the bunny's eyes. And I also painted the little face on the pencil. I decided to add white highlights onto the bunny's eyes just to make them pop a little bit more. So that's a just very opaque watercolor. Now I'm drawing in the bird some more, adding in the cheeks to the bunny. That's just a light whoosh. Signing my name. Yeah, don't forget to sign your name. That's pretty important. Okay, so looks like we are done. And I hope you enjoyed watching this.